He was taking medication, steroids, that were not for human consumption.
He never prescribed insulin because he didn't need insulin.
True.
Overdose is a possibility. I have no idea which benzodiazepine this is. I don't know how much it is. It could be one, it could be more than one. I have no idea.
The defendant has now elected not to testify in her own behalf.
Natalie Cochran not taking the stand after all. Her defense team says there's no need. So we're talking about whether the prosecution has proven that she's a murderer and what the state needs to do today on rebuttal. And what happened to A$AP Rocky's gun? Trial watchers are waiting to see the evidence that one was fired and if it's a real gun or a prop gun. Our own firearms expert joins us live. Plus, we're spotlighting our next trial for you, the socialite manslaughter trial for Penny McGee. This is happening in the same courtroom as Karen Reed's trial. And also this hour, we're talking about picking the perfect jury for a teen boy who killed his father and months later is accused of murdering his mother. It's all coming up next for you, plus much more right here on Opening Statements. Good Tuesday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? We got a sensational show planned for you, so let's get started. Go ahead and grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. You can never get in trouble for what you don't say. My mother taught me that, and it's so true. What a smart move by Natalie Cochran opting not to testify. My friends, that was the best decision she could have made. On Monday, I've got to say, her defense team, they won the day on Monday. Throughout this trial, really, they've been raising so much reasonable doubt. They've done it through medical experts and through the children that she and Michael share. They raised so much doubt that Natalie Cochran might have actually ruined it if she would have testified. So, great decision. The prosecutor would have destroyed her. Absolutely destroyed her credibility by bringing in her crimes of deceit, her Ponzi scheme, where this lady was so cold and so heartless, she defrauded people that she loved. Her friends and her family were victims. So Natalie Cochran would have ended up looking so bad to this jury that they would likely think that she's lying again about how Michael died. So she was very smart to keep quiet, to not let them judge her in that way, and to leave the hard work to her lawyers. My friends, as we're looking ahead to closing arguments, I have to tell you, this is anybody's case. And by not testifying, Natalie Cochran just gave herself a better shot at winning. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
Not only was the defendant having an affair with Baker, but they were also swinging with other people. Her older daughter, Jessica, who you'll hear from, found Baker sleeping in the defendant's bed.
In California, we've got the opening statements picking up today in the celebrity hairstylist murder trial for Monica Cementilli. The victim is her husband, Fabio. That case is going to start up at noon. We'll take you there when it does. In Florida, we've got opening statements set to potentially begin today in the trial of Collin Griffith. Have you heard about this kid? Jury selection starts at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. He's accused of murdering his own mother. And guess what? Not too long ago, he killed his father. That was deemed self-defense, but we'll see if that case gets reopened. Now, in Massachusetts, our newest trial on Court TV is also set to begin today. We've got the socialite manslaughter trial for Penny McGee. That one's going to be in front of the Honorable Beverly Cannoni. You know her from presiding over the case against defendant Karen Reed. That one's going to start up at 9 a.m. Eastern. Now, to our top story, the Ponzi scheme murder trial of Natalie Cochran starts up at 10 a.m. today. The state's going to put on a rebuttal case after the defense rests. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft reports from West Virginia.
Good morning, Julie. Natalie Cochran is not going to testify in her own defense. Earlier in this case, she had informed the judge that she was going to testify. But after hearing from several defense expert witnesses, she changed her mind. We have heard differing expert opinions as to the cause and manner of death of Michael Cochran.
Dr. Dragovich, in your professional opinion, what killed Michael Cochran?
I don't know.
On Monday, defense medical experts dismissed the state expert findings that Michael Cochran's manner of death was homicide. Rather, defense experts said the cause and manner of death is undetermined.
Would you agree that any other finding, including Dr. Uribe's conclusion of homicide due to exogenous insulin administration, is unsupported and unsubstantiated by all of your research and testimony?
Yes.
And the state will put on a rebuttal case, calling Trooper Heinzman to the stand. Julie, that's the latest from here. Court proceedings get underway a little later this morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
All right, our thanks to Kelly Craft for that early update. Now, let's talk some more about this case. Is the defense winning? Let's bring in our legal eagles. Joining me, former homicide prosecutor and professor Melba Pearson and former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Randolph Rice. Good morning to you both. Let's start with, is the defense winning here? They had quite a day on Monday. Melba Pearson, what do you think?
Good morning, Julie and Randolph. And yeah, the defense definitely planted those seeds of reasonable doubt. I think the testimony of the children of, the victim and the defendant's children was extremely powerful, to the point where you even saw the defendant crying as a result of what was being said. So those are things that the jury looks for. They want to see that emotion. They want to see that, I wouldn't necessarily say remorse, but at least, some sort of sadness over the death of the victim here. So those things are going to be problematic, as well, of course, as the battle of the experts. But I still think there's things that the prosecution can do in rebuttal. I mean, the one part of the testimony, the defense testimony, was that the defendant was very sick and that she was advised not to travel the next day. Well, did she seem sick to first responders? Did she have any remnants of having a flu or something like that? So there's different ways that I think the prosecution can still poke holes in the story in their rebuttal case, but it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle at this juncture.
Definitely. Melba, great points. You're so right about the kids. The kids tipped the scales of justice, and yesterday those medical examiners did as well. Dr. Priya Banerjee, a friend of the network, friend to this show, a lovely forensic pathologist and expert witness, she testified for the defense, said that she detected in reviewing the autopsy, there was a drug that was not prescribed to Michael Cochran that showed up in his urine, making her wonder if there could have been drug abuse going on. Let's play that clip.
I just know that was a very strange result, given that he's not prescribed this at home. And then again, it's a drug of abuse, meaning if you're not prescribed it and you're using it, that is misuse.
Okay, the defense team calling two experts, as you know, Randolph Rice, two forensic pathologists to say, this wasn't a homicide. This was not an insulin overdose, if you will, that caused this, or poisoning. What do you think? Did the defense team even the score? Did they negate what the state did in their case, Randolph? What do you think?
I think the defense team did a great job of calling these two witnesses, because what they had to do in this case was cast doubt on the state's case that the insulin was the ultimate cause of Michael's death. And they did that with these two experts. The first one saying, I don't know the cause of death. And the second one coming in and actually supporting the defense's, I think, going to be their closing argument, which is Michael Cochran was taking steroids from Mexico. He was shoving handfuls of different supplements into his mouth every day, as his kids testified to. So these witnesses, these experts, validate what the defense is saying, obviously, in their arguments, but they're also putting that doubt as to the argument of there are other things out there that could have caused this death.
Oh, right. Great points, Randolph. So the prosecutors, we know, have the burden here. It's their burden. They brought this case. As we know, the defense has no burden. They could have sat there and presented nothing, and that couldn't be held against Natalie Cochran. Melba, tell me, what do you think these prosecutors need to do today when the defense formally rests before the jury and then it's time for rebuttal? Where do you think they need to go?
I think they need to go back and refocus the jury on some of the key points that they made earlier. Obviously, you can't repeat the same evidence that you had entered before, but I think talking about the fact, like, why was his glucose level so low? Because that was one aspect that the state's expert was talking about, that his levels were so low that it spoke to an overdose of insulin potentially. So going back to that, going back to any toxicology that they have, going back to the fact that the defendant told 3 different stories during the course of her talking to detectives. The truth doesn't change. So reminding, the jury about that. The picture that she texted to her friend talking about, oh, I wish I could put a pillow over his face because I don't want to see him suffer that way. Is this how you talk about your spouse when they're not, this is not a situation where they have terminal cancer or something like that. So just kind of reminding the jury about all these different inconsistencies to refocus them away from the battle of the experts. But again, this is a really tough one in terms of what's been revealed so far.
Yeah, it really is. I really like what you're saying there. Randolph, I want to ask you as well. You've served as a prosecutor too, like Melba. Anything else you would add to that? Anything else you think that this jury really needs to hear before they go deliberate?
I think Melba hit a lot of good points. I wonder, though, how much the prosecutors are going to use the Ponzi scheme evidence and motive in their closing. There was some restrictions on what they could talk about, but it certainly was discussed among a lot of the witnesses, certainly the earlier witnesses, the friends who had talked about the Ponzi scheme and being involved. And the defense obviously used that against them to say you had some motivation to come in here and testify against Natalie Cochran. But how much is the state going to rely on that Ponzi scheme alluding to evidence in their closing against Natalie Cochran?
Yeah, really great points. Randolph, thank you for that. I'm so happy you and Melba are on the show with us. Our Legal Eagles, today we have more questions for you. Stay put, please. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, here's what's coming up on Opening Statements.
If I think she's going to do something, even if she's not, I might act. I'm not going to go crazy or anything, but I'm not sure, honestly.
Okay. You're not sure if you're going to hurt?
Only if she tries to hurt me.
We're talking about picking the jury for the teenager accused of murdering his mother months after he killed his father. But first, unanswered questions in A$AP Rocky's trial, like where is the gun? Our firearms expert joins us live.
Tonight on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. We have a big hour ahead here.
Your deplorable actions are unforgivable.
The community still doesn't know how this Boston police officer died.
He can't prove one element of his case. It was a dramatic day, a dramatic moment inside the courtroom.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
The second person who you see, who is instantly confrontational with Mr. Efron, is the defendant, Mr. Mayers. During the period of time that they are off screen is when the defendant first produces that semi-automatic pistol.
Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about one man's jealousy, lies, and greed. And that man is not Rocky Griffith. That man is Terrell Efron, or you've heard the name, Relly. He is the source of all the evidence in this case. All that.
The felony assault trial for hip-hop star A$AP Rocky is what's trending in true crime. His testimony resumes later today in Los Angeles. During the opening statements, the state presented a glimpse for the jury into the evidence that was collected against the Grammy-nominated rapper, which included a 911 call from that night and surveillance footage of the incident in question. Now, the defense team claims that the gun seen in the footage was a prop gun, saying that Rocky only fired the gun to scare off alleged victim Terrell Efron, or A$AP Relly. Now, according to responding officers, no signs of a shooting were found. So this morning, we're wondering, where's the gun? Let's bring in our firearms expert. He's a former special agent and supervisor with the Department of Homeland Security, Dr. Jason Piccolo. Dr. Jason, good morning to you. So it seems that there could be two scenarios going on. Either it's a real gun and Rocky's a real bad shot and he misses and grazes this kid's knuckles, or it's a prop gun, didn't fire at him, or, fired and blanks, came out, nothing hit him, and this kid faked that injury. What do you think might have happened?
It would be stupid to carry a prop gun in real life, because if you're using it for protection and someone else has a gun and you pull out a prop gun, then you are going to be shot, maybe, and die. So don't use a prop gun. And I don't, in this circumstance, we'll have to see what the actual weapon, if they do produce one later on, which I don't think they will, is a prop weapon.
Right. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Jason. You know, you teach courses on firearm safety and training and self-defense, and prop gun's not the way to do it. And his lawyers even noted that he was licensed to carry a firearm, so no prior criminal history. It would be lawful for him to go and do that. Why wouldn't he be? So let me play a clip for you, Dr. Jason. This is where the state of California, in their opening statement, is describing the moments that led up to what they say was the shooting.
Mr. Efron will tell you that during the period of time that they are off screen is when the defendant first produces that semi-automatic pistol from his waistband. That at the time that he was pointing the gun at Mr. Efron, he was also threatening Mr. Efron. I'm gonna kill you.
Okay, so Mr. Efron, also known by his stage name ASAP Relly, you know, they're part of the same collective as we know, the ASAP crew. He collects spent cartridge casings, so he says, and brings them to police because we know the first responders didn't see any evidence that anybody left any brass behind. Dr. Jason, what do you say about that? The likelihood that this crime victim, if he is one, collected the evidence himself and took it upon himself to put it in the hands of detectives?
Well, there's an issue with that. In law enforcement, and you know this as well, you need a chain of custody. Now, you need to identify where you grabbed that evidence, how you collected it, and who was involved with carrying that evidence from point A to point B to point C. Now, you were saying that you have two shell casings. How do we know you got it from there, and how do we know you didn't just go to a gun range and get them or collect them from some other source? So that's the biggest issue with that, is the chain of custody.
Right, right. And Dr. Jason, you always take us to school. I understand you may have some props with you today. Anything we can take a look at that might be helpful for investigators in determining whether or not these spent cartridge casings came from any gun belonging to ASAP Rocky?
Well, the issue is, let's say we can get that evidence in there. Let's say we say that they are real shell casings. The issue with the blank firing weapon, if the ASAP Rocky says he was carrying that, is that a real bullet, let me try to focus that, has a projectile. Yeah, has a projectile on it. And the bottom part of that is the casing. Now, in a blank firing weapon, you will not have a projectile. You'll have an empty casing. So if he brought forward two real live bullet casings, you would absolutely see that they are not blank firing casings. So that's going to be the biggest issue there, if they can get the shell casings in there. So let me bring that back up. The tip of that bullet.
Yes. Okay, wait, so let me just time out to make sure. Okay, so what you're saying is, if the state can authenticate this evidence, right, if they can get past the chain of custody issue, which you said about, you know, this alleged victim grabbing them rather than a detective or Sergeant Thomas Zizzo, who we're going to talk about in a minute, the first witness called, if they get them in, you're saying you can tell whether they came from an actual firearm or a prop firearm.
Oh, absolutely. You see that the front part of that projectile, that is, or the bullet, that's the projectile that will fire out of a weapon. Now, if you're shooting this and that projectile comes out, it will leave that back part, which is the casing. Now, you could absolutely tell that if it was a blank firing or if it was a real bullet by the casing itself. So I'd love to see these casings that they have in evidence right now.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Jason, we're going to have to do part 2 with you once they get that introduced and have you take a look and see what you think. So all of this being said here, does it seem to you that a real gun was fired?
Oh, in my personal opinion, yes, a real gun was fired. If a real gun was produced and they could authenticate that those were gunshots in the videos, then yes, absolutely, in my opinion, that was a real gun used.
Excellent information from you. As always, Dr. Jason Piccolo, thank you so much. Now, let's talk about the other big thing getting attention with this case this morning, and that is the first witness called to the stand in the state's case, LAPD Sergeant Thomas Zizzo. So Zizzo is the son of Bravo's Real Housewives of Beverly Hills star Erica Jane. And Zizzo also responded, to that shooting of Terrell Efron, allegedly, back in 2021, or ASAP Relly. So that's why he was the first witness called by the state. He was the first witness called to that, or the first officer called to that scene. We have a clip from him. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
You were searched for signs of shooting, right? Correct. All right. You didn't find any broken glass? No. No damaged cars? No. No bullet holes? No. You established no shell casings? Correct. No blood? Correct. In fact, you didn't find any signs of shooting, right? Correct.
All right, so Sergeant Thomas Zizzo not done yet. He started his testimony on Friday as the first witness called by the state of California, and now he's going to continue today and be cross-examined some more by A$AP Rocky's defense team. And just the fact that he was called and just his relationship with Real Housewives of Beverly Hills star Erika Jayne has people in Hollywood talking. So what's everybody saying? Let's bring in someone in the know. I say he's the leading authority on all things Housewives. He's the host of the podcast No Filter. Zach Peter is with us. Zach, good morning to you. What's the good word in Hollywood?
I mean, I have to say, the internet especially is on fire. Nobody had this on their bingo card. It kind of feels like that's the theme of 2025, but everyone was like, Erika Jayne's son, A$AP Rocky, like we're trying to connect the dots because we didn't see these two worlds colliding.
Right, Zach. And so then once everybody figured out, oh my gosh, that's who he is, it's like everybody couldn't stop watching him, right? Because we don't typically see him on the show, do we?
No, what we've seen on Housewives with Erika Jayne is that she's kept him more private. You know, we've seen a couple of scenes where she'll talk about him and being an officer, and you know, we see her kind of let her guard down as a mom that worries with her son, you know, out on the front lines risking his life to keep us safe. But for the most part, she doesn't even really post about him on social media. So the fact that we're really kind of seeing him speak for the first time, because we've never really watched him on the show, and you know, a lot of Bravo accounts are like, wow, we've never heard from Tommy, and now I think, you know, he's become a hunky new heartthrob on Instagram.
Right. He's handsome. He's a ranking officer. He's a sergeant. You know, Zach, you know Erika Jayne. You've interviewed her before. I would think that this has to be such a proud mama moment for her. Her son, who's a real life hero, getting called first out of the gate. You know, with trials, you want to call your best witnesses first and last so that the jury has that great impression, the primacy and the recency. And the fact that they started with him, I think, really says a lot.
It does. You know, like you said, they lead and they end with their strongest witnesses. So obviously, Tommy's going to be crucial in this case. And I think, you know, she's always been very proud of him. We've seen her speak very highly of Tommy on the show. And I would imagine now that the public is kind of getting a peek at him with his uniform on, and we're seeing him on the front lines in this case. And so far from what I've seen online with Bravo fans, they've been really positive. And even some people are like, okay, I'm glad we get to see him, but like, let's remember that, like, you know, she does want to keep his privacy, you know, a top priority for them, because obviously as a mom, you want to protect your kids as much as possible. But I think the reception that people have had to him and seeing his involvement in the case has been really positive. So, you know, I would imagine she's very proud of her son.
Right. Oh, I'm sure, Zach. And I like what you said there about how she's protective of him, no matter how old your children are or how tough they are and strong they are. You know, you're always a mom, right? And I would think he's probably protective of her too. Do you know how he treats her?
Oh, absolutely. He's, you know, very protective of her. I know he checks on her and likes to make sure that she's, I mean, listen, when you're a cop and you kind of see some of the, you know, what goes on in the shadows of Los Angeles, I would imagine now that he's much older, you know, he wants to protect mom a lot more. And I know that she's, you know, they have a very special bond, which is sweet.
Right. No, it is. And how old are they, Zach? Because they look like they could be siblings.
They do look like they could be siblings. I know he's now, I want to say, in his mid to late 30s.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
he's a big boy now. He's grown. Sure. He's not the little boy that she was raising growing up.
Sure. No, definitely. Beautiful people, beautiful mother and son. And tell me, do you think this could possibly wind up in the show, Zach? Before we let you go, I want to ask you, do you think that Bravo could make a storyline out of this with Erika Jayne and maybe the proud mama moment of seeing her son in this big trial that people around the world are watching?
You would think so, because I know in the past we have, like, when, you know, Lisa Rinna's daughter was dating Scott Disick, like that became a talking point. point. So the housewives tend to bring these things up, but unfortunately they're not in production. We have the new season of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills that's airing right now, so they probably won't go into production for the next season until late summer. So I would imagine this either gets completely glossed over or we might not even see it on the show at all.
Oh, I gotcha. Well, Zach, next time you talk to Erica Jane, tell her all of us from Court TV thank her son for his service, and we'll see him more this morning. Zach Peter, thank you. And my friends at home, check out Zach's podcast, No Filter with Zach Peter. Zach, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
When we come back, we're going to be spotlighting the brand new trial we've got starting today on Court TV in Boston, and you're going to recognize the courtroom and the judge. This is the manslaughter trial for defendant Penny McGee. And Judge Cannoni from Karen Reed's trial is presiding over this one as well. And we've also got jury selection happening for Collin Griffith, this teenager accused of murdering his mother. What kind of jurors are you going to pick to tip the scales of justice?
So I came to live with her after my dad died. And since then, there's just been kind of times when things boil over with her.
Welcome back. This morning, we're shining the spotlight on a brand new trial we have for you here at Court TV, the socialite manslaughter trial for Penny McGee. The 54-year-old mother of three is accused of causing her ex-husband's death after an altercation at his house. And her 18-year-old daughter is an eyewitness. Court TV anchor Julia Janae reports.
A prominent Massachusetts mother, Penelope Penny McGee, is facing manslaughter charges in the death of her ex-husband, Andrew Savitz, 5 years ago. Savitz made a name for himself during the 1988 presidential campaign of former Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis and worked as an environmental consultant. He was also the author of a sustainability book for business, The Triple Bottom Line. Court documents say McGee went to her ex's home after 10 p.m. on January 28th of 2020. McGee was reportedly upset by an email she got from her ex-husband's brother, evicting her from the home she'd been living in for years. She told police Savitz attacked her. But the couple's 18-year-old daughter heard the commotion and heard her father asking McGee to leave. That's when the daughter called 911, and while on the phone, she saw her mother slapping and pushing Savitz and him falling to the floor. The autopsy concluded that Savitz, who did have health issues, died from cardiac dysrhythmia following an altercation.
Oh boy, so is she going to be responsible for his death? We know there's an altercation, but can prosecutors make the link that what happened caused the death? And there's another component to this. Apparently, the defendant struggled with a drinking problem. And we know the defense team wants to keep it out. The prosecution wants to put it in. Let's talk about this. Let's bring back in our legal eagles, attorneys, Melba Pearson and Randolph Rice. So let me start with a clip here. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts detailing for the court that the defendant's daughter is going to give testimony and recall what she remembers from that date in question, seeing her mother very drunk. Let's take a look.
What I anticipate you'll hear is that Ms. Zuzi Savitz will testify that her mother appeared intoxicated and that she knew that from seeing her intoxicated in the past, and will describe her observations of her mother stumbling, having slurred speech, acting erratic, and having crazy eyes.
Okay, so if they can establish she was drunk on the day in question, what does that mean for both sides? Randolph Rice, would you start us off, please?
If I'm a defense attorney, I love this because this gives me a couple of different options for defenses. An intentional inebriation or intoxication could be a possible defense for the lack of intending to cause a battery, which is one of the elements the state must prove that ultimately led to the death of this victim. So I think this might be backfiring on the state for them because the defense could come in and say, hey, she couldn't form what we call the mens rea, the ability to know what she was doing, the intention to cause that battery.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good point, Randolph. Melba, tell me, do me a favor for the sake of our analysis. If you're on the side of the prosecution, How might you refute what the defense will likely do, what Randolph just pointed out for us, try to embrace that? What do you do to counteract that if you're the Commonwealth?
Well, what I'd be curious about is the history of the defendant, not only in terms of alcohol, but was there a history of domestic violence? Because again, is this the first time that she's laid hands on the victim, or has this been an ongoing issue that every time she gets drunk, she becomes abusive towards him? Because remember, domestic violence can happen. Anyone can be an abuser and anyone can be a victim or a survivor. So was there a history of that? What was the time frame? Was it that she got drunk once she heard that she was being evicted and deliberately went over to the house in order to confront her ex-husband? That kind of changes the mindset a little bit versus, you know, she was just in her normal, let's say, struggling with her alcoholic addiction state and then ended up, after hearing the news, going to the house. So I think the order of events is going to be important as in the prosecution's case in presenting this.
Yes, important distinction you just pointed out, Melba. Thank you for that. Randolph, let me go back to you on another point. The defense wants to keep out that Ms. McPhee apparently had a habit of putting wine in her water bottles, taking them with her. Apparently it was a daily drinking problem that she struggled with. We've got a clip. You're going to hear some of the arguments made before Judge Cannone here.
The officer in a report said something about he believes there was wine in the bottles, in the water bottles. They didn't seize them. They didn't test them. There's no indication of what he bases that statement on. The short story is we don't have anything to show that there was, in fact, wine in the water bottles.
The alcohol consumption goes to the credibility of those statements, her state of mind at that time.
Ooh, so what should Judge Cannone do here? Randolph, what do you think?
Well, the rules of evidence are very specific about what can be admitted in terms of prior bad acts or prior activities of the defendant. But if it shows a pattern of the defendant, it is an exception to the rules of evidence. So the judge may allow this in, but ultimately it's going to be used for credibility, I think. It doesn't really go towards, well, let me take that back. It may go towards her ability, as I said previously, to form that intent to cause that battery. Because remember, they have to prove that obviously a death occurred, that she intended to cause a battery, and that she knew or reasonably would have known that that battery would have caused the death of the victim. So I think it puts some sort of gray area there with having alcohol involved in this as to what she knew would happen that day.
Yeah, great points you're making, both of you. So let's talk a little more. So with this incident, we know that she was upset. We know he was evicting her. She was mad about it. We know they definitely got into it. But in terms of proving she caused the death, Melba, curious to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think the state is going to be able to get there to prove she actually caused her ex to die?
This is not going to be an easy one because, again, the easy ones very rarely go to trial. So there's a lot that the defense can use to basically mitigate, much like Randolph was mentioning earlier. But I think the prosecution still has a good case to be able to move forward with because, again, you have a witness. Granted, it is the daughter, so that does bring other levels of complications in there. But you do have a witness that can conclusively say she pushed him, she slapped him, and after she did those actions, the victim crumpled to the floor, and then the next thing you know, he was no longer with us. So it's a very simple cause and effect. Like, she hit him, she pushed him, and then he was gone. And the medical examiner makes it very clear that it was basically as a result of being hit, he went into cardiac arrest. So it is kind of straightforward. The question would be the mens rea aspect, as we had discussed earlier.
Sure. Professor, thank you for that. Randolph Rice, let me go back to you, please, with a defense strategy question. What are your thoughts? I know this is early, but on the possibility of Defendant McPhee testifying. Do you think this could be a case where it could help her?
Well, I think it's very telling in this case that she selected to have a bench trial or a judge trial, because when you have good law, you go with a judge trial. When you have good or bad facts, maybe you go with a jury trial. But in this situation, I think that they realize that the facts of this case don't line up with what the law requires, and that's why they chose the judge trial in this situation. So I think if they play it pretty clean here, they try to keep out things that may damage, but the judge is going to see past that, right? The judge is not like a jury. They're not swayed by emotional arguments or grandstanding in the courtroom. So I think if you play it clean here for the defense, you have a really good chance of winning this case.
Randolph, thank you for mentioning that as well, the fact that this is a bench trial before the Honorable Beverly Cannoni. Yes, we all can sometimes make inferences, you know, just on that fact alone, as you said, for why go before the judge, not before a jury. So thank you. And I'm being told we have a live picture. So as we head to break, let's show you a picture of the courtroom. It should look familiar to you. As we mentioned at the start of the segment, this is the courtroom where defendant Karen Reed was tried and will be tried again in a couple of months. Everybody's getting all set up for this one, and as soon as Judge Cannoni takes the bench, we will go there live. Big thanks to Melba Pearson and Randolph Rice for all that great insight. We're going to hit a break. Still to come, how the jury in the case against teenager Collin Griffith could be tipping the scales in his murder case.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cementelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cementelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The celebrity stylist murder trial, today, only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Opening Statements. Now for what's tipping the scales of justice in a trial beginning this week. We're calling it the Deadly Son murder trial. Teenage defendant Collin Griffith, once accused of killing his father, ended up being cleared. They deemed it a case of self-defense, is now on trial accused of murdering his mother after authorities say that he stabbed her to death. Griffith claims that during a fight with his mom that she lunged at him with a knife and then she fell on it. That's his story. Body camera caught some of his interactions with the family leading up to his mother's death. Take a look.
She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that. I don't know exactly where she's at. She thinks I'm gonna kill her, and then I want to kill her.
That's Collin Griffith in 2023 talking about his mother after he was arrested for battering her. Collin denied threatening Catherine.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped you off to your mom and telling us that you said, don't put me in the car with her, I'm gonna kill her.
Yeah,
Was that said?
I did not say I was gonna kill her. I did not say kill.
Just 9 months before that encounter with police, Collin was arrested for the shooting death of his father in Oklahoma. Those charges were later dropped because police believed that Collin shot his dad in self-defense. That's when Collin moved in with his mother in Florida. An affidavit for a search warrant says that Collin and his mother didn't get along because he didn't want to follow her rules.
It's important to understand when you look at this, you see a kid. When I look at him, I see a psychopath.
In September of 2024, Collin was charged as an adult with first-degree murder for an attack on his mother.
He's already, at 17 years of age, shot and killed his father and got away with it, and stabbed his mother in the neck so hard that the knife went all the way through and was to the back of her neck.
Witnesses saw part of the attack in front of Collin's grandmother's home.
At about 4:30, witnesses and neighbors see Collin and Mom arguing outside, and Collin grabs his mother by the hair and drags her into the house.
2 hours later, Collin called 911.
Where Collin said, I've had a very, very long fight with Mom, and she fell on a knife and she's bleeding from the neck. Our investigation clearly and unequivocally shows that that circumstance did not occur like that.
All right, so what kind of jurors should be hearing this case. Think about this. I'd say the defense is going to have a tougher time than the state in getting a fair jury here. So let's bring in our expert guest now. He's joining us by phone, jury consultant and friend of the show, James McGarity. James, good morning to you. We had a little tech trouble there. We can't see you, but we can hear you. So tell us, please, when we think about who the defense is going to want to pick to hear about this kid, who would be ideal, would you say?
Well, the defense has a tough hill to climb, but what they'll be looking for are people who have, experience or sympathy for the foster care system. They either personally or people close to them have been victims of an abusive or uncaring family. They will be able to sympathize with Griffith. They've been product of an uncaring household, and they feel like in their life they're just fighting to survive. So they'll empathize with that kind of life that he lived. They are active, or they have a lot of activity in organizations in need, charities like the Shriners, the ACLU, organizations like that are looking to help people in need. Or they also live the belief that false convictions occur commonly, that people who have been falsely convicted of crimes or have been in situations that led to a conviction happen more commonly than people realize. And they believe that, the police are lazy and often hurried in their investigations, and they rely on weak evidence to reach convictions.
Okay, so essentially the side of the defense is going to want people who are going to be really sympathetic and really open-minded here. Whereas the state, James, give us an idea who they want on their side.
Well, the state is going to be looking, their theme of this case is going to believe that the evidence speaks for itself. No charge against someone like Griffith would occur unless there was some reliable kind of connection. They don't trust they do trust the police, detectives, because they're reliable. They know what they're doing, and they wouldn't bring a charge like this unless there was reliable evidence. And they'll also believe that the defendant fits the profile of a murderer. It's easy to sell to either a judge or a jury. And this is an also tough hill to climb. They'll believe that both parents, killing both of them is a just huge mountain to overcome, that a circumstance like that wouldn't occur unless their child had done something wrong. And they believe that most people in jail and are convicted are under-punished. They don't receive the sentences that they should oftentimes.
I see what you're saying, James. People who think that no punishment is harsh enough, those people that really want to see justice or wish that we had eye for an eye punishment, perhaps. We've got to leave it there for now. But James McGarity, it's always great to have your insight and your expertise on this show. We'll get you again one day where we can see you. Thank you for working through the tech difficulties with us. And thanks to you at home for being with us here. That is all for this episode of Opening Statements. And guess what? If you liked it, you can see it again. We put all the episodes up there for you on courttv.com. Click on the Shows tab.